Dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to welcoming you to this ECOG webinar. It is a webinar opening a series of webinar in response to the current situation. I believe that we are all used to these webinars. Now I'm really excited to have a very special webinar as an opener. Reducing childhood obesity in Europe is our common issue, our common goal, and we will discuss COSI contribution for policies and practices in this webinar. My name is Weghuber. I'm the current president of the European Childhood Obesity Group, and I don't want to take too much time in the very beginning. We have 2 hours of presentations and discussions in front of us. Just a few practical informations at the very beginning. The webinar is recorded and will be made available together with the slides that will be presented. Very important, there's a Q&A tool that you will be asked to use. And we will collect these questions you put in to discuss them briefly after each presentation, and we will have a summary Q&A at the very end of this webinar. Very importantly, please tell us by using the Q&A tool who you are addressing the respective question to. It is my pleasure to introduce renowned speakers today who will be presenting. Up front, it will be Dr. Joao Breda, who is head of the WHO European Office for the Prevention and Control of NCDs, and he will be opening. Julianne Williams is a technical officer in NCD at the regional office of WHO, and she will be presenting together with Marta Buoncristiano, who is a WHO consultant. We will then be hearing Angela Spinelli, who is head of the WHO Collaborating Center of Childhood Obesity and director of the Italian National Center for Disease Prevention and Health Promotion of the Italian NIH. And finally, Rito, who is a researcher at NIH Portugal and heading the WHO Collaborating Center there, and the director of the research center there, will be giving the final presentation. So this is our agenda, and it is important that we have that we keep some interactivity. So up front, we will be the speakers will be asking you a polling question that we ask you to answer, and we'll come back to this thereafter. So thank you very much for being with us today. It is my pleasure now to welcome Joao Breda to this webinar. Joao, thanks for being with us. May I ask you for your presentation now?
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm really delighted with this invitation, very happy with the collaboration with the ECOG. It's a very important organization that puts a lot of focus on the prevention and control of childhood obesity, which is obviously very important for us. Childhood obesity is linked with many non-communicable diseases. It's a very serious condition in many children in our European region. And of course, we have to do everything we can to prevent and to tackle this childhood obesity problem in the region, which is to a large extent is actually not decreasing. On the contrary, is becoming very important challenge, particularly in some countries across the region. So I have a presentation that I would like to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen and I hope you can see it. My presentation today will be mainly focused on trying to give you an understanding of how the childhood obesity surveillance initiative that we have started in the European region already many years ago, more than 10 years ago. This was an initiative of the regional office at the time, supported by 2 countries, particularly Italy and Portugal, and which is already preparing for the 6th round of data collection. So the Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative, which is basically involving more than 40 countries out of the 53 in our European region, already measured very close to 1 million children across all these countries. And we have very significant data for basically around 30 countries at the moment, and more engaged and involved in this important initiative. Clearly, COSI, as we like to call it, has been a very important instrument, a very important tool in terms of providing data for countries, for policymakers at country level to make a difference and to advance their policies in terms of non-communicable diseases. So in our region, we really have a particularly relevant mandate around non-communicable diseases. And when we talk about non-communicable diseases, we know we are focusing on obesity, cancer, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and others. And the WHO European region is well known for having long-standing, let's say, documents and policy frameworks that are adopted by member states and at the same time support member states in putting forward policies that can really make a change. So this is not anything new for NCDs in general and also for childhood obesity. So probably the region overall in the context of the 6 regions of WHO globally that has more powerful and so to say more long-standing set of frameworks to tackle NCDs and in particular childhood obesity as well. Why is this important? Because really we are faced with a very important challenge, which is of course to achieve the targets that member states have agreed around obesity and childhood obesity and all the major non-communicable diseases. And overall, all of these would contribute to the Sustainable Development Goal objective as well, which by 2030 aims to have a reduction, which is just above 1/3 in terms of premature mortality by the major non-communicable diseases. And as you can see in this graph, in this slide, we still facing many challenges. So about half of the countries in our region, we don't estimate that they will achieve the Sustainable Development Goal target in the area, Sustainable Development Goal 3.4, which is the target related, of course, with non-communicable diseases. So we have a big challenge. Some countries moving faster than others. Of course, countries in the eastern part of the region, they show in green here, they're coming from a worse situation. It doesn't mean that countries in red are doing worse, but it means that they are probably moving slower in terms of being able to achieve these targets. Having said that, so childhood obesity is an important element here because these prevalences are coming from behind, and these prevalences are really having an influence in terms of the future of NCDs in Europe. And of course, they're going to impact our likelihood of achieving the target also further into the future. So really, I would say that a really important upstream objective for the region, which is showing to be really difficult to achieve, and we need to move faster. We need to accelerate progress if we are to achieve this target. Overall, a combined, overall as a region, we may be able to achieve this target, but when we divide country by country, it will be difficult. And if you look at this next slide, in the objective number 7, these are the NCD targets presented in separated fashion. This one is for adults. There's also a target, as you know, for children, which is being difficult to achieve also for many countries. But here, the obesity one is really showing very difficult for us to really, achieve it by 2025 and then again in 2030. So again, obesity is putting a big challenge in terms of the NCD agenda overall in the European region. We know that the prevalence is very challenging. COSI is a tool, and for the first time showing really with the high comparability with across the region, what is the situation in fact, and this is an illustration mainly for boys, just to really show how we have gone a long way since 2007, where basically data was not available. The aim of this slide is really not to show and to compare countries, but really to show that the situation is challenged for most countries. We have 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 4 kids, which are already overweight and obese in the region. It's not nothing new. It's a situation which is challenging, which many countries are addressing, a few of them with actually very positive results. So those in the south of Europe particularly, although prevalences are very high, these are countries that are showing really progress. And I'm sure that Angela and Anna and Marta and also Julianne, they will talk about that. What for us, and particularly for me, is very relevant is really the conditions like severe obesity. The prevalence of obesity and severe obesity are very significant already in many of the countries in our region. And we really need to look also at obesity as a very serious health condition, particularly in children. And sometimes it's difficult to imagine what other health conditions are so challenging when it comes to children, because we all know that children tend to be very healthy. So obesity, major challenge here, which we need to address. We also know that, and it's not rocket science, that the situation of obesity is composed by low levels of physical activity, combined with, of course, with the situation around food intake and diets. And we also know that progress is relatively slow in our region. In this slide, I would just like to illustrate that in many countries, there is still no policy development or implementation for some of the critical elements that have been identified as best buys or good buys in terms of tackling diet-related health issues, and particularly childhood obesity. So in a nutshell, just to say that, yes, we are challenged by low levels of physical inactivity, and unhealthy diets then compose, at the end of the day, the recipe for the situation that we have around childhood obesity. So in other words, we really need to do more in terms of policy implementation and evaluation if we are to prevent childhood obesity in Europe, and some countries have actually been doing it very well. Not all countries have a comprehensive approach, and we would like to propose that we need a comprehensive approach. With some examples, we can be inspired by some countries. Therefore, we need to start just at the right time. And some would argue that the right time is just before pregnancy, and therefore WHO has been working on that. So the best start in life. We need to continue using the full benefits of exclusive breastfeeding, which are not used for the full extent in the European region. And this slide shows very well, also based on COSI data. Anna will be presenting on that. We also address the issue of breastfeeding apropos of actually of COVID-19 as well. So continuing, then we need to start, complementary foods which are appropriate and are the right ones for children. Ideal homemade, but we know that commercial products are also taking a strong role here, and those commercial products sometimes are really not that healthy, and we need to also pay a lot of attention to that. So then having tools that help us keep an eye on the situation and looking at really trying to have monitoring and surveillance systems which are appropriate, combined also with really supporting member states in the areas where we know there is a great opportunity and there is really a lot of action in terms of child health, notably the areas around digital marketing, which is, as you probably know, an area where WHO has been developing a lot of work. So if you follow our work in this area, you will see that we have been developing a series of tools, and we continue to work on supporting member states in this area of the digital work. We believe that all of this work needs to be combined. The prevention of childhood obesity needs to be combined with the broader agenda in terms of diet and physical activity at European and country level. So it should not be singled out and should be part of an agenda which is complementary, using stronger tools. As we said before, some countries also use price policies like sugary taxes, but also making sure that we combine the action around diet and nutrition with what needs to be done around physical activity. And in this slide is just a simple illustration on how WHO has really been working with countries, particularly with the European Union countries, but also expanding for the eastern part of Europe, notably in the area of health systems, but also in the area of the education sector as well. If we have children that have a problem for overweight and obesity, we also need to tackle that from a health systems perspective. And this is an area where WHO, with many of our partners, we have been developing some tools and providing some support to member states and stakeholders as well. So thank you very much again for ECOG for the collaboration in this area. We really need, again, this needs to be done in a more comprehensive fashion in terms of integrating diet and physical activity as well in the context of health system. We use a lot our networks in terms of providing support to countries, from implementation research to focal points around the work we do on physical activity, on SALT, on promoting health literacy and using behavioral insights to shape behaviors, on marketing of foods to children, but also with direct support to countries. And here you see an illustration of this. So our work again around sustainable diets and physical activity. Also linking with sustainability, so very much trying to work with colleagues in other offices across the WHO Europe, and also with partners in terms of addressing the issue of sustainability together, using our research to really scale up research and using our networks, our collaborating centers, to make sure that we are able to really benefit from the excellency of research institutions we have across Europe to tackle childhood obesity. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. we are very much focused on this collaboration, and we hope we can really move forward with this partnership, with which we are very happy. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Joao, for your lecture. We have about 5 minutes now, so can I start out by asking you, what is your personal impression coming from a surveillance study? What is the impact of the COSI study on national policies? What have you seen in different countries across these 40 countries has changed from the very beginning?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a very important, it's a great question. And in fact, we believe, and we have seen a lot of development in many countries across the region, and those actions have taken place many times following the availability of this data from COSI. So the fact that you have highly standardized, highly comparable data, countries collaborating, working together, making their data available, really is in many instances the base for policy development and implementation and evaluation. Actually, it is with great pleasure that we see at least a handful of countries where you can find already a decrease in the prevalence of childhood obesity. And that follows, it's not by accident, we believe that follows to a large extent efforts to implement the right policies. Countries can choose and they will decide what is the best mix of policies that they can implement in their own context and then take forward their policies. Not one size does not fit all. Countries can choose their perfect mix for the national context, but we've seen a lot of action following, in fact, COSI is the biggest surveillance initiative globally at its kind. Other WHO regions are actually following, and make no mistake, we believe that having measured 1 million children across Europe just around in 10 years and such a lively and strong collaboration between member states, I think it's a proof that this works and speaks for itself. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joao. I personally strongly believe that COSI is in fact making a difference, and that there's so many people now pulling together their forces. The fact that there's close to 400 people now registered for this webinar is just a snapshot of what is happening. From the other perspective, what is it that people on the webinar could do to support COSI and policies in their respective countries from your point of view?
I can imagine that many COSI collaborators are also involved in this call. Really, we depend on the support by the countries, and countries have very large teams and they conduct their studies very independently, harmonized, of course, methodologies and all of that, and WHO supports in analysis, publication, reports. So I think it's a very nice network that works in a very nice way, in a perfect fashion, I would say. What we would like to see is that we would get a bigger dissemination of reports and the research papers that are published. And we would like to see other research groups, other policymakers also at the national and subnational level to use these results. So we would like to also conduct other analysis. We would like to really, the data would be used for other types of initiatives. And therefore, we trust that those in the call that are interested.
Great.
That would be great. So we are willing to collaborate on that.
Okay. Well, thanks. There was some delay. There's a question to you from Emma Boyland. What do you think, Joao, will be the impact of COVID on the challenge of tackling childhood obesity across Europe?
Well, I mean, again, a very important question. We have seen recently several studies that look at the outcomes and severity of COVID-19 in obese individuals, and there is a strong connection there, as well as with other non-communicable diseases, notably diabetes and cardiovascular diseases, so that there is really a strong link here, and I think we need to take that into account. Of course, there is an impact in terms of the implementation of the survey at the national level and so on, but this network is very flexible. We have a lot of data where we can focus in terms of the analysis, and we can, in some countries, pause for a while. It's very important to tackle the issue of the pandemic first, and COSI is a very strong collaboration. We'll continue to work together, and I'm sure that we will, of course, need to adjust, and we are already adapting in terms of the response we are giving, but I'm sure the network will come on the other side even stronger. And there are, of course, also initiatives from many of those in the network also to look at the challenges around physical activity and diet in children during COVID. And that's really a very nice development, I would say. So yes, indeed, we are challenged, but we are adjusting and adapting very, very nicely. Thank you for that.
So we have time for one final question. Now, what do you think, is it the right time to focus prevention actions onto the first 2 years of life, since we already know the importance of this period of life?
I mean, absolutely. We all know today, I think it's unquestionable that this early origin of later non-communicable diseases is important. We know that we can start the prevention of non-communicable diseases, and particularly obesity, very early in life, particularly even starting before pregnancy, and therefore this life course approach is very important. First 1,000 days, absolutely critical to tackle all forms of malnutrition, and certainly obesity is very important. COSI is about primary school children, but we know that we need to start before, and the data we have in children under 5 is not as good in Europe as the data we have in children 6 to 9 years old due to the development of COSI. So we need better quality data, more comparable, and certainly, yes, this is why it is important that nutrition during pregnancy, breastfeeding, complementary feeding, all of that is absolutely critical. So we have to work in tandem, hand in hand, and really take a life course approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joao. We will now move on to the second presentation, looking at COSI methods and main further findings. So it is my pleasure now to welcome Julianne Williams and Marta Buoncristiano. It's great to have you here. Please give your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. And among the panelists, I'm actually the newest member of this group. So it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you about history, with the caveat that this is in the presence of the principal investigators from Portugal, from Italy, with Joao, and just their work over more than a decade creating this. So it's a pleasure to be presenting about the history. And I wondered actually if we were to start with the question. I think Milena was going to present it at the beginning of our presentations. And so if it appears, I'll read it. Otherwise, we'll go on with the presentation. Okay, so I'm not seeing it now. So, oh, here it is. Okay, so the question that we have for you in the audience is, why is surveillance of childhood obesity important? And as Daniel said, if you can please submit a response, we will revisit this during the Q&A session. So the answers are, it is important to monitor trends over time, to track progress reaching global targets, to evaluate the potential effectiveness of public health interventions, to inform public health policy, or all of the above. So please make your vote and we will discuss later. Thank you. Okay, so now we will continue. It's my pleasure to present this, this snapshot on the history and methods of the Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative with Dr. Marta Buoncristiano, who is the statistician for COSI on our team. So my name is Julianne Williams. I'm a technical officer at the WHO European Office for Prevention and Control of NCDs. And the slide that I have here is of the Sustainable Development Goals. And for many of you, this will be very familiar. For some of you, it may not. So these are 17 goals that were adopted in 2015 by 193 countries. And they're very ambitious. Right now we have 10 years to reach these goals. And the goal that we often talk about at the World Health Organization is good health and well-being. And specifically, as Joao mentioned earlier, goal number 3.4, which is sort of a goal within a goal, to reduce premature mortality by 1/3 from non-communicable diseases. So things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and cancers. And so the short and simple truth is that too many people are dying too early from diseases that can be prevented. And obesity is really a core risk factor for these conditions. So one of the interim goals, as we look to 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals, is this goal here. It's a 25% reduction in this risk of premature mortality from those non-communicable diseases. And so this is a goal that's 5 years away. And one of those indicators, which is really relevant today, is this halting the rise in diabetes and obesity. And the WHO had an independent commission come and really look at how we can end childhood obesity. And one of the key recommendations that they had in this report was for member states to have data collection on BMI for age of children and to use that data for setting national targets for childhood obesity. And this is one of the reasons that the Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative is so important. It fills that key recommendation. And it's also a key area for the comprehensive implementation plan on maternal and young child nutrition from the WHO. So this is for 2012 to 2025. So again, we're coming up very close. It's a 5-year goal from now. And there's this goal here of halting the rise in childhood obesity and overweight. So a 0% increase in childhood overweight. And COSI is so important because it can help us monitor progress toward actually reaching that goal. And when I've heard colleagues talk about the Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative and its history, it often starts in 2006 at the European Charter on Counteracting Obesity, which was a meeting in Istanbul around this time, remarkably more than 14 years ago. And at this time, the 46 countries declared their commitment to strengthening action on counteracting obesity and really placing the issue high on the political agenda for governments. So it really called for action, and key to that action is having the sufficient evidence for immediate action. And at the time when the COSI was established, which is often said 2007, only about a quarter, only about 25% of the 53 WHO member states had nationally representative and validated data on childhood obesity among this age group. Furthermore, where we did have data, there was often a lack of trends data. So we couldn't look at progress over time, if levels were rising, if they were plateauing. And there was great variation between the different countries in terms of their data collection methods and analysis. So it was almost impossible to compare countries because there were differences in their sample sizes, in their methods of collecting the child anthropometrics, in the response rates, in the age groups that were studied, and even in the definitions of overweight and obesity. And so since its launch, COSI's participation has increased from 13 to 45 countries. So you'll see here on the left a map of those first countries that were part of COSI at the very beginning. And then here on the right, you'll see for round 5, where we currently are right now, data is collected every 3 years, so there have been 5 rounds. You'll see in color here the countries that are participating. So this is a really exciting picture. It shows that most of the countries, 45 of the 53 in our region, are participating in COSI, and that's taken place since COSI was launched. Another slide which could show the increase of COSI over time and participation is number of measured children. So Marta will talk a little bit about the methods of measuring children within a school-based sampling frame within countries. But you can see that when COSI started for round 1, there were about 178,000 children. And that's increased now to about 250,000. And for round 5, we anticipate it will be even larger. And another kind of telling and interesting number is the number of participating schools. So when COSI first started in round 1, there were about 1,700 schools. And by round 4, that had increased to about 8,200. And for round 5, when it finishes, we will also see an increase. Now, COSI was implemented in a few different ways in countries. Most countries established it as a new system in the country. So they started collecting data among children where previously no data were being collected. And those are the countries shown in blue in this map. And you'll also see there's subnational participation in a few places, including the Russian Federation and in Germany. And so in these places, it was a new system. In a smaller group of 10 countries, COSI was integrated into existing monitoring measurement systems. So it was taking what was already being done, but adjusting it so that it could be part of the COSI project. And as I mentioned earlier, we are in round 5 of COSI right now. And this is a map which shows the countries that have currently completed their round 5 data collection. The COVID-19 pandemic and the associated disruptions started while some countries were still finishing their data collection. So the good news is that about 31 countries were able to successfully complete round 5 data collection. And for a smaller group of about 6 countries plus Yekaterinburg in Russia, it was disrupted. We're hoping they can join later. And for 6 countries, they were not able to collect data in this round. And we are currently publishing the data from the round 4 data collection for COSI, and there's a report that will be forthcoming. featuring those results. And additionally, the principal investigators in this project have been working very hard, and also with some other collaborators, to create a special supplement on obesity data in Europe and moving from data to action. And we'll be publishing that supplement in early 2021 in the journal Obesity Reviews. And it should feature about 12 papers, which include many of the COSI data for a variety of topics. So we're really excited that this will be coming, and we will be publicizing more as it emerges. So now I'd like to thank you again and hand the slide over to my colleague, Dr. Marta Buoncristiano, who will be talking about the COSI methods. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julianne. And okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see it? Yeah. Okay, I would like to thank ECOG for organizing this important seminar and for inviting me and being part of it. I will present the main methodological characteristics of COSI, and I would like to start from the purpose of COSI, because the main characteristics directly descend from this purpose. So COSI purpose is to measure overweight and obesity in primary school children in order to monitor the trend developments over time and to enable inter-country comparisons within the European region. So if this is the purpose, the main characteristics are that surveys are performed routinely, and usually, I mean, the first round took place every 2 years, and now we have a round of data collection every 3 years, and surveys are based on nationally representative samples. Then the study population is formed by primary school children, meaning children aged 6 to 9 years. And of course, the setting of the study is the primary school, but it is not just because at primary school we can find the children that we would like to target, but it is also because primary school is a very important environment for promoting health lifestyle. So it is important to investigate this environment where our children are growing up. Then data are collected according to a common protocol, using common record forms and data collection procedures. This common protocol identify a frame for the study, but it allows some flexibility in order to include in COSI also those countries that have already existing monitored measuring systems. So we don't want to duplicate the systems. We would like to be able to include also those countries that have an experience in this in this field. So for this reason, the common protocol allows for some flexibility. And then what was already stressed by the other colleagues before me, children are measured by examiners who have been trained in measuring weight and height using the WHO standardized technique. So we are not speaking about self-reported measurements, but we're speaking about measuring children following common procedures and techniques. So which are the age group that the COSI target? So we have basically 4 age groups from 6 to 9, and participating countries can select one or more of these age groups. Just to give you an idea, I will show you the age groups that were targeted during COSI round 4. So the 7 years old are children that were mostly targeted by country, actually by 25 countries out of 36 that collected data in 2015, 2017. Then we have 15 countries that targeted 8 years old, and 8 countries that targeted 9-year-olds, and just 3 countries that targeted 6 years old. So 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds are the age groups that are most covered by COSI. So, and then we have 10 countries that targeted more than one age group. So let's see how we select children to participate in the study. We have 2 approaches. The first one, according to the first one, all children of interest, so meaning children belonging to the same age groups or to the same primary school grade, are included in the study. Of course, this is an approach which implies a lot of resources to measure all children. So it has been followed, it has been applied by just few countries in COSI history. So basically 6 countries. All the other countries decided to have a sample of children to participate in the study. So of course, this sample has been randomly selected in order to be able to infer the results from the sample to the population. So these children were selected following a quite strict approach from sample point of view. So again, if we look at COSI round 4, out of 33 countries that selected a sample of children, we have 17 countries that applied the same sample designs, which is a 2-stage cluster design. So they first selected the schools, and then in each selected school, they selected classes, and it invited to participate all children that belonged to the sample classes. Then we have something similar for other 8 countries. They selected directly, they had just one stage, and some different design in other 8 countries. These differences came from peculiarities of this country. So they adjusted the sample design to meet particular characteristics in these countries. So because we selected a sample, it's important to know how many children should be selected in order to provide good quality data. So according to COSI protocol, a minimum effective sample size of 2,800 children per target age group should be reached. When we speak about effective sample size, it means that at the end of the data collection, we should have measurements for this amount of children per each target age group. The overall number of children approach should be higher to consider that not all selected children participate in the study, and also not all children in selected grades are from the specifically targeted age group. Just to make an example, if we want to target 7-year-olds and we include first grades, there can be children younger or older in first grades than 7-year-olds. So we need to take into account for this when we plan the sample size. And then there are countries that are interested in having subnational estimates, which brings an increase of the sample size. In the figure here, you can see the effective sample size per target age group in COSI round 4. And you can see that there is a quite variability among countries in sample size. We have some countries that didn't meet the suggested effective sample size of 2,800, but most of the countries did it and also have a sample size even higher. And we have few countries with very big sample sizes. Among these, there is Italy, which has a very huge sample size because in Italy, COSI is implemented to have subnational estimates, and this brought a big increase of the sample size. So let's say what are the topics covered by COSI. We spoke about childhood overweight and obesity because of course this is the main purpose of COSI, but then COSI cover also other topics like nutritional behaviors of children, physical activities, screen time, sleep patterns, and also health supporting school environment. To cover all these topics, we used 3 forms: the child record form, the school record form, and the family record form. Just to give you some numbers, in COSI round 4, 24 countries used family form and 33 used the school record form. And for COSI round 5, we expect an increase in the number of countries that use the family form. We expect to have 32 countries that they use this form, which is something that we really encouraged as WHO, because through this family form, we collected important data on lifestyle behaviors of our children and also family background. So let's see a little bit more in detail these 3 forms, starting from the child record form. Before going into the items covered by this form, I would like to stress that parents have to be fully informed about the study procedures, and informed consent has to be obtained before the child's enrollment in the surveillance in order to take measurements and to collect data on voluntary basis. So the record form gathers information on, of course, child's sex and date of birth, place of residence, child's habit of having breakfast, date and time of measurements, and child consent to be measured, because within COSI, even though the parents allowed for measuring their child, we always ask the child if she or he would like to be measured. So, and if the child says no, no measurements. And then, of course, we use this form to record child's anthropometric measurements. So it means body weight and height, but also waist and hip circumferences, even though these 2 last measurements are not mandatory within COSI. It means that the countries can choose to take the measurement or not to take it. Then. So here you can see some of the procedures, common procedures to take anthropometric measurements. I will just say a few things, then you have the slide. You can go more in detail through this list. But what is important is that, as I said before, measurements are taken by trained examiners using standardized procedures, but using also standardized instruments, meaning that the measuring precision of the scales of stadiometers is the same in all countries and should be the same across all rounds in order to improve the comparability of data over time and, of course, among countries. And children are measured wearing normal light indoor clothing. So we ask them to take out all extra weight that they can have. And the type of clothes worn by the child during measurement is also recorded, because we use this, because based on this clothes, then we we have some, we adjust the body weight. So when we analyze the body weight and weight and obesity, we do it having adjusted the weight for the weights of clothes worn during the measurements. And of course, the height and body weight are not routinely communicated to parents because we are in the context of a surveillance system and not on screening initiatives. So the family record form is filled in by child's parents or caregivers, and it gathers information on child sex and date of birth, characteristics at birth and breastfeeding, and then transportation from and to school, so how the child go to school by motor vehicles or by foot, time spent on practicing sport, time spent on actively playing, screen time, hours of sleep per night, and then we investigate the consumption of some foods and beverages, like fresh fruit, vegetables, soft drinks, but also sweet treats, savory snacks. And finally, we gather information about the socioeconomic characteristics of the family. Again, this is really important because allow us to investigate socioeconomic inequalities within, in overweight and obesity, but also in lifestyle of our children. So it allows us to have some information about improving, promotional activity targeted to specific part of the population. Then we have a school record form, which is completed by the school principal or by the teachers of the sample classes. And through this form, we gather information about participating classes, meaning that we registered the number of examined children who refused. This information are really important because it allowed us to calculate the participation rate in this survey. So from this data, we can say something about the quality of the data that we produce. Then we have frequencies and time length of physical education and school availability of playground and indoor gym. Then we have the availability of selected food items and beverages on the school premises, like fruit juice, soft drinks, again, vegetables, savory snacks. And then we have the presence of school canteen, cafeteria, and vending machines. And again, then we collect information on the integration of nutritional education into the school curriculum, and advertising also of energy dense and poor nutrient foods are targeted through this school record form. And finally, we asked for current school initiatives to promote healthy lifestyle. So this is my last slide. It's just a snapshot on participation in COSI round 4. And you can see here the countries by the proportion of children invited to participate that were measured. So as you can see, in COSI round 4, we had 36 countries that participated, and in 13 countries, the proportion of measured children was above 19%. So it's a very high participation rate of children in measurement. Then we have other 11 countries that with a participation rate between 80 and 89%. So basically, as you can see from this figure, most of the countries are on the left part of the figure, meaning that we reached a very high participation in COSI round 4, at least in terms of a proportion of children that were measured. We still have some countries with lower participation rate, which means that there is still space to improve from this point of view. And on the right part, you can see countries by the proportion of children invited to participate whose parents and caregiver completed the family 4. As you can see from these figures, the proportion, the participation level when we look at the family is a little bit lower because we have, for example, most of the countries with a participation rate between 70 and 79%, 8 countries, and just and other 9 countries with higher participation rate. But we have also some countries with quite a lower level of participation. And again, it means that we should work more on involving the families in the study, probably through the school system. So we have probably space to increase the engagement of the schools in the study, and through this engagement to have a higher participation of the families, which is, generally speaking, when we think about this kind of survey, is quite good, even if can be improved. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Julianne. Thank you, Marta, for your presentations. There's a few questions coming in. We have a few minutes for that. Peter Bergton is asking, can COSI data be used for longitudinal studies? Meaning that are there ways of following individual children over time?
No. No. There are a few countries that actually targeted as something that we say semi-longitudinal study, but because they targeted the same grades, in following rounds. But we don't have the information about the single, child. So even if we measure this child in 2 rounds, we are not able to know, to merge the data from the 2 rounds. So it's not strictly a longitudinal study.
Thank you. Marta Garcia Solano asks, can you tell us how many countries and which ones had used the Sentinel approach for COSI studies?
I would say in round 4, I think that should be around 10 or 12, something like this. Use this approach, Sentinel approach. I didn't mention it. It means that the school acts as a sentinel site for the study. So once we selected the first sample of a school, the country keep this sample, over time. So the next round, the same school are included in the data collection, even though new classes are selected and new children. So this means the sentinel approach.
And there's another question by Sarah Jarnin to Marta. Are children who are living with overweight or obesity more likely to refuse measurement? Is there a risk of selection bias?
Yes, there can be a risk of selection bias, of course. We cannot measure it in the sense that we don't, of course, as we cannot measure children that refused, whose family refused the children to be measured, we cannot have a real measurement of this eventual bias. But then when you have so high level of participation rate, the risk of bias is really low. So the best way to avoid this situation is to work on improving the participation of families and children in the study. And again, we have some very good example within COSI of countries that reach a very high level of participation rate. And for example, and the countries that joined COSI from the very beginning are a good example as Portugal and Italy. And if we look at them, I think that the key of the success is to engage the school in this study, because if you have the school on your side, I mean, it's more easy to involve all children, all families in the study. But there is still always, I mean, the possibility of bias selection, even though we think that it's quite low in most of the countries.
Thank you so much, Marta. Thank you, Julianne. We will now move on to the next presentation. We will be hearing Angela Spinelli, and she will be presenting data from the COSI study. Again, thank you for joining us today. We will be looking at the polling question at the very end and looking at Q&As at the very end again. Thank you again. Angela, the floor is yours.
I'm very pleased to be here with you and to present this data on COSI. And so what I'm going to present is the main data we collected in 2015-17, which is the fourth round of the Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative. And I will present the data on weight, height, thinness, overweight, and obesity. I think we all agree, and the colleagues of mine who presented, who spoke before, made very clear that assessing weight status during infancy and childhood is important for all the effect that thinness, overweight, and obesity can have on child development, health, and well-being. And in 2015-2017, we conducted the fourth round in 36 countries of the WHO European region. National representative sample of children aged between 6 and 9, like Marta showed, were measured by trained staff, it is very important, with similar equipment and using a common protocol. And this means that we had more than 200,000 children in total who were measured in this way. And this allowed us to make a comparison between countries. The WHO cutoff were used to compute a height for age, weight for age, and BMI for age zeta score. And using this cutoff, we were able to estimate the prevalence of thinness, overweight, obesity, and severe obesity. About weight and height, the result of this study showed great variability, geographic variability in height, weight, and BMI among children aged 6 to 9. And the children in Northern Europe in general are tallest. Those of Southern Europe are the heaviest, and the children living in Central Asia are the lightest and the shortest. However, even in these areas, we have a wide variation within each area. So not necessarily all the countries in Northern Europe have children who are the tallest and so on. Similar differences have been found in other studies, although, and reviewing the results of singular countries, this may be explained by genetic, nutritional, and environmental factors. And I would be very happy to discuss this with you. Going to now the prevalence of thinness. It certainly is not a great problem in the European region, but we still have countries where this prevalence is higher than 5%. So we have to consider this and take account of this problem. This is among boys and among girls. Overweight and obesity are certainly a much more important problem in our region. The situation is worse, and lots of countries, over 25% of boys and girls who are with overweight or obesity. That means 1 child out of 4. And in some countries, as you can see, it's even more than 1 child out of 3. The prevalence is higher in some Southern European countries, in particular in Malta, Greece, Italy, Cyprus, and Spain. And this is true among boys, but also among girls, where the situation is slightly better. For obesity, we have more or less the same picture. Of course, the values, fortunately, are slightly lower, but again, we have countries with the prevalence of obesity in boys which are higher than 18%. You see here some of these countries. And the same among girls. So the situation is certainly to worry all of us. What we were able to do, because, this is the question, the next question I like to address, is we were able to group the countries, because we had such a large number of countries, in macro region. And in particular, we used the United Nations Statistic Division of regions, and so we had quite a lot of countries in Northern Europe region, Western Europe only 2, so we were not able to make an estimate for this area. Then few countries for Eastern Europe, lots of countries for Southern Europe, some countries of Central Asia, and a few countries for Western Asia. And because the number in this region was less than 50% of the total number of countries, we didn't estimate the prevalence of thinness, overweight, obesity, and severe obesities in Western Europe and Western Asia. And I hope you have already replied to this question. And a second. This is the situation we observe in the 4 areas we consider. And the data show that thinness is still high in Eastern Europe and Central Asia in boys and girls. Overweight is very high all over in our European region, and in particular in Southern and Eastern Europe. The same picture is for obesity and severe obesity, which is a great problem, in particular in boys. So it's very important, like Joao already said, that we take care of these kids who need treatment, and so we have to do something for these kids. In order to study more this problem of severe obesity, we also did an analysis on specifically on severe obesity using the COSI data from 2007 and 2013. But so we used 3 rounds of COSI, and this gave us power to look at this problem. And we had more than 600 children in this case from 21 countries. And again, the prevalence was higher in Southern Europe, although it varied greatly among countries. As you can see from this graph, in red is the severe obesity, and you clearly see that not necessary in the countries where we have a high level of overweight, including obesity and severe obesity is higher than in other countries. Anyway, severe obesity prevalence range from 1% in the Swedish and Moldovan children to 5.5% in Maltese children. So 5% of these children were severe obesity. And this means that in many countries, 1 in 4 obese children was severely obese. So it's important that we have to consider this and find how to help these children and their families. Looking at the data according to gender, so boys and girls, the prevalence of severe obesity was generally higher among boys. And I'm not showing these results, but if you go to the article, you can read also about the trends, temporal trends, and the analysis by child's age, which don't show a clear pattern. So in some countries we going in one way, and in other countries going another way. So no clear pattern on by time and child's age. Severe obesity was more common among children with a lower maternal education level. This is another aspect which is very important because we notice that there are lots of inequalities in prevalence of obesity and severe obesity. And so is an aspect which I think we have to consider very much in the future for our actions. And I draw your attention on this. So in conclusion, we observe a significant variation between countries and macro regions. Some countries in Central Asia and Eastern Europe still showed the prevalence of thinness higher than 5%, so less than other WHO regions, but still a problem in some areas of the European region. The highest level of overweight and obesity were seen in Southern Europe. So we Southern European countries have to work harder and try to do everything is possible. I understand why we have these high levels of overweight and obesity. Several countries of Southern Europe, again, had the prevalence of severe obesity higher than 4%. And the prevalence of all non-normal weight categories were usually higher in boys than in girls. Although I have to say that this difference disappeared when we use the EOTF cutoff. So again, another aspect I'd like to draw your attention to. There was a general tendency for the prevalence of obesity to increase with age, from age 6 to 9, and in low socioeconomic condition. Again, inequalities which are an important aspect of this disease. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Angela. Can I start out by asking a question asked by Nazan Yardim? How did you decide on how to group countries into macro regions? What was the basis for grouping these countries?
Well, the main reason is to see if there is a similarity among the countries in the same area, and also it's in order to see, I mean, if the countries belonging to more or less the same areas, and probably so we think having the same diet or similar attitude towards physical activity or other factors have say the same prevalence. And I must say yes and no. I mean, you've seen that most of the countries in the Southern European macro region have a high level of obesity, but there are exceptions, so it's not always the same. But we did, try, and we used the United Nations group way of grouping the countries, and we try in order to see if there was there were similar values.
Okay, so thank you. It was the United Nations grouping strategy that you used. Can you expand a bit on the trend over time in the overweight and the obesity and in the severe obesity groups? Is there three respective groups?
Sorry, I didn't hear your question totally. At a certain point you blocked.
Okay, again?
The other heard, but I heard, I think it was something about a trend over time. Is it?
Yes, I was asking if you look at the trend over time from the very beginning of COSI, is there a difference in the group of overweight children and children who are obese and those who are severely obese? Are there differences in these three groups over time?
Unfortunately, only some countries collected data in all the COSI rounds. So we can do this only for some countries. We are now doing this. And as Julianne said, we are working on a supplement for obesity reviews. And in fact, most of the data I presented are not published yet, so you are very lucky. I mean, Joao was very kind to say, okay, we present this data. And, as I said, I mean, not all countries did collected data in all rounds. So we just now starting to look at the trends over time, and in countries which are collected data in at least 3 rounds, because otherwise it's a bit difficult to say if there is a trend. And so maybe next time I'll tell you about this.
Okay, so Margarita Crowley asks you, could it be that the relationship between the higher prevalence of obesity in the southern countries is related to the lower economic level of these countries?
We know, I mean, not necessary. It's true that some countries are low economic level, but it's also true that, I mean, some of the countries like Italy is one of the G7, is one of the countries among the 7 who are more rich in Europe. So it's not true, but it's true that if we look at the data in the countries which have a large number of children, a large sample, it's true that even in the country, in each country, we see a difference between poorer areas or social economic, low socioeconomic condition and high socioeconomic condition. So anyway, when we also analyze the data, taking account of the socioeconomic condition, still we have a higher level of obesity and severe obesity in the Southern Europe. So it's not only the question of condition, socioeconomic condition in Southern Europe.
So thank you very much. And Angela, I think we will be able to get some further insight during the next presentation. And also we will have some time to expand a bit more during the final Q&A. Thank you so much. We will now move on to our final presentation by Dr. Anna Rito, looking at the dietary habits from the early years to primary school. Anna, it's so great to have you with us. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I like when you say the floor is ours, because we are all on different floors, but we have the Zoom floor. Thank you so much, Daniel. And it's for me, it's very delightful to share with you some of the data. Of course, I will follow my colleague's lead, and I will present some COSI data as well. Let me see if I can, okay, let me see if I can do it. Do you see the screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So what I will bring you today is dietary habits from early years to primary school. And of course, it will be based on COSI data. My name is Ana Rito. I'm the head of a research center called SAIDS, and I'm also a researcher at the NIH in Portugal. So my presentation will be focusing in 3 sections. I will talk about a little bit of breastfeeding, breastfeeding practice. I will talk about dietary habits in primary school children, of course, the COSI from COSI participants. And I will bring you as well, just to be more interactive with the audience. And of course, some of the questions I will also pose. So I will actually ask your point of view on some of the questions. So, and I will bring you some successful interventions that we have been doing in Portugal. So to tackle some of the variables that that I'm presenting today. So I think it's undeniable when we talk about the health benefits of, breastfeeding, all of the psychological benefits, the endocrinological benefits, the immunological benefits, all of the benefits that breastfeeding has. And we, of course, know that the WHO recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life. So I think having a tool like COSI, it's really important because we can monitor the breastfeeding practice among all countries on the same way. Of course, it is not the actual, let's say, breastfeeding practice, meaning that, as you know, these retrospective studies. So we asked the mothers if they knew about their breastfeeding practice when their child were born. So we are posing questions to mothers of 6, 7, 8, 9 years old or 10 years old. So it is retrospective, and it demands, of course, memory of it. But anyway, it is the methods like Marta and Julianne presented. The methods allow us to actually learn about breastfeeding practice among European countries on the same way. So what I bring you today is data from these published paper. And you can download it and see it in a more detail. But it is a very nice way to have, again, from 100,533 families, mothers, that actually respond to this study, and it is from 22 countries. So what you can see here, I will not, show all of the data that we have in this study, but I will focus in particularly three graphs and graphic representations. So when we see, for instance, the region, the 22 countries, among these 22 European countries, we can see that Ireland is actually the country with the highest percentage of children who have never been breastfed. So we have like 46.2%. So it has, in a way, the lowest rate of breastfeeding practice. And but we also can see that except for Malta, France, and Spain, most of the countries have breastfeeding practice above 77%. Having countries like Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Albania, and Kazakhstan with the highest rate of breastfeeding practice. When we ask mothers if they breastfed their children for 6 months or more, we then can see that Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Albania, again, these countries from Central Asia, were the countries with the highest rates. And but on the other hand, we have France, Malta, and Ireland with only 1 in every 4 mothers that actually breastfed for 6 months or more. So it is very diverse, these data between the European countries, but we can see, some groups of countries that actually have the highest rates of breastfeeding. So the goal and the goal of WHO is, of course, to increase exclusive breastfeeding up to 50% by 2025. But we know, and even from other data, we know that the prevalence is low in Europe. So one of the questions that I really would like to raise in the audience is why is that? Why exclusive breastfeeding is not something that is actually being so much promoted, or even if it is promoted, it's not well taken from the mothers. We can raise several issues, and I actually would like to see what you would bring to the table to kind of have some discussion, because this is actually from data, and we know that we have a lot of initiatives ongoing. We have a lot of policies. Ministries of health have been having national policies on, increasing breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding, but still it is quite low. And from our data as well, we can see that only 3 countries, so Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, actually reach that region, that goal already in 2016. This is data from COSI round 4, so this is from 2016. So only 3 countries actually reached this goal. We didn't have any data from other countries as well, so we only analyzed 12 countries. Why is that? Why maybe mothers do not understand so much what is exclusive breastfeeding to start off with. So something, regarding exclusive breastfeeding is not being, the message is not reaching as well as we would like. So the other issue, and it is super important, is of course the association of breastfeeding and obesity. We know for a fact now, and we have studied this, and in this study we present that breastfeeding is actually a protector factor in terms of obesity. You can see here for the pooled estimates that only 9.2% of children that were obese were breastfed for 6 months or more. So it is a protecting factor, and it is even a higher protective factor when we see this relationship or this association between exclusive breastfeeding and obesity. So that said, on small sum up of this issue regarding breastfeeding, we know that this childhood obesity risk is higher if children were never breastfed. The type and duration are important to increase this protective effect. 13% of reduction in the odds of being overweight and obesity if the children were breastfed, and each additional month of breastfeeding lowers 4% of overweight. And this is, of course, an issue that is absolutely important because we know that obesity is an underlying condition that increases for COVID. So one of the things that I really would like to highlight, and following Joao Breda presentation, that WHO recommends that mothers with COVID-19 or suspected or confirmed should be encouraged to initiate or continue breastfeeding. So I don't know, it is a common way of thinking that mothers that are with COVID cannot breastfeed because they are afraid that, of course, the virus can be transmitted through breast milk, which is not true. So there's no evidence suggesting that the virus could pass through the breast milk. And of course, it's also for pregnant women, not evidence as well that the virus is detected in any amniotic fluid or umbilical cord, blood, or placental tissue. So it is really, really important to continue to recommend breastfeeding during these uncertain times. Moving on to another part of my presentation. Of course, we bring you what we know from our COSI data. We have a food frequency questionnaire in this family record that, again, it is regarding the actual children's habits, dietary habits. And we also have this already published in this recent publication in Nutrients, led by Julianne Williams. Okay, so what do we know? We know that, for instance, breakfast consumption, it is, again, very, very diverse. And we have percentage of children that who consume breakfast every day range from 48.9 from Kazakhstan to 96.4 in Portugal. Of course, regarding breakfast, we do ask if the child have had breakfast more than a beverage, let's say milk or tea or juice. So some sort of breakfast. Again, it is really diverse, and we have, and what does it means? Well, we will talk a little bit later on. When we look into the fresh fruit consumption, we can see that the consumption of fresh fruit every day was highest in the Southern European countries, with 8.8% in San Marino. And daily fresh fruit consumption was actually low in the Central Asia. So these countries actually showed a lowest percentage of consumption of fresh fruit. When it comes to vegetables, a little bit almost the same. We have, although in the Southern European, in Southern Europe, we have, you know, ranging from 9.1 in Spain to 70.3% in San Marino. So it's actually also very diverse. So we cannot say that Southern Europe has actually a highest consumption of fruit. And again, we can see except for Turkmenistan here, we have, again, the Western and the Central Asia countries with the lowest consumption of vegetables. When it comes to soft drinks, it is almost clear that the Northern European countries have the lowest consumption of soft drinks. And when it comes to Western Asia, they have actually the highest percentage of children that were consuming soft drinks. Okay, so moving on to some of the successful interventions. I would like to start that, again, we follow WHO recommendations on several issues, but of course, salt for us is very important. What I'm going to present in some sort of intervention that we did in Portugal. So again, it is actually possible to reduce salt content this is an intervention that we did. It's called Eat Mediterranean. It was an intervention community-based program, and we actually tried, and we actually were very well successful, I think, in decreasing the mean sodium content of these complete school meals. I'm not going to be very long on these interventions. If you want, I can explain, or give you the publication so you can read all about it. But we actually managed to decrease the mean sodium content of these school meals in 2 years. We also focus our attention in sugar. We had another intervention, and we actually managed to see that regarding breakfast. So remember that when I told you that Portugal was one of the countries that's showing with the highest level of breakfast consumption, but it means that this breakfast consumption is all about sugar, meaning that 66.5% of these children actually eat ready-to-eat cereals at breakfast. So, and all of these ready-to-eat cereals were above the nutrient profile that more or less has a threshold of 15% of of sugar content in these ready-to-eat cereals, and 84.6% of these ready-to-eat cereals were above this threshold. So a lot of sugar going on. So what we did, in the same way, we intervened and we managed to reduce the consumption of ready-to-eat cereals and actually to improve a little bit the consumption of fruit and other things in breakfast. Sugar tax. So also, again, talking about COSI, COSI was very important because with actually the data from soft drinks consumption in Portugal, which was quite high as well, we could actually support some policies regarding sugar tax on soft drinks. And it happened in 2017, and it actually brought down the consumption level in Portugal regarding soft drinks. And on a final note, I think for all of these successful interventions, we cannot and never forget and not include the local governments and and do it on a local level. I think communities are very well aware of their own individuals, and I think we should continue to focus our interventions on a local level because they know more. And COSI, again, allow us to go on a local level and understand what we can do. So not only it gives you a national perspective and a European perspective, a regional perspective, but also on a local level. And one of the programs that we actually did regarding like a local level community-based program called MUNSI that we have been directing and managing for the last 10 years, we actually did see a very good decrease on the prevalence of overweight and obese only by doing continuous and routinely community-based initiatives on local level. Okay, so that's it for me today. I hope you and I can learn a little bit more from these data and move forward with some of the questions that might arise from this presentation. Thank you so much.
I thank you. We thank you, Anna. Now it is time to dive into Q&As again. And I would like to start out by asking Milena to provide us with the results of the first polling question, where we asked, why is it important that we do surveillance? So let's see. Here are the results. Well, obviously, all of the above is what the common consensus is, that we need to do this to monitor trends over time, to track progress, reaching global targets, to evaluate the potential effectiveness, and to inform public health policy, which from my point of view stands out in terms of importance. This is how we actually want to get stakeholders to get moving at the end of the day. Now, here is a question to you, Anna, from Maria Diaz. Is it possible that the highest rates of breastfeeding are related to longer maternity leaves?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. First of all, I would like to invite all of my colleagues to join me in answering all of the questions because, of course, COSI is not only focusing in one or two or three variables. So I think it's important for everybody to actually participate in these last questions. It might be, of course, we only know what we have on COSI data. And I think it is actually a very nice question. And breastfeeding is something that we only start to kind of unveil what these data, what it represents. And I also would like to say something that, you know, every time that we actually look into some data, we almost feel the need to intervene and to know a little bit more. Meaning that COSI is very flexible in a way to every round to include other questions and other things that arise from every time we look into the data. And I would like to say, even from previous questions that were asking, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Of course, we have a core, you know, a core set of questions that we will never move. Otherwise, we will lose the way of comparing through the first rounds. But there's other questions that we actually need to come and bring to the COSI network. And of course, one of these could be explained by that. I would say as well that each country has to look into their own data and try to figure it out why this is happening. And breastfeeding, again, I will say regarding exclusive breastfeeding is something that we need to move forward. So I don't actually know if it is related. I think it would be a nice way to look into data and to compare and to see if it is actually related. We don't have that information. I think Marta could help me on that, but I don't think we have information on maternity leave in COSI, but it's something that we actually can look further. Thank you for the question.
Well, thank you. Considering the fact that each month of additional breastfeeding lowers the prevalence by 4%, I think this is worthwhile looking into it and getting to know the determinants very precisely.
Can I just add a small comment?
Please go ahead, Marta.
Okay, now I want just to confirm that we don't have any data to investigate this topic, but I would like to highlight that this was a good example of what surveillance data can do in terms of stimulating a new question and also pointing at new area of investigation that probably should be covered by more specific and target study. I mean, this is the role of I think that the real added value of a surveillance system, besides comparing among countries and over age, the real contribution can be just to put a flash, to put a light on field that can be more investigated more and can stimulate the discussion and also the need of more data to provide more efficient and efficacy policies and action. So this is really the surveillance system. What surveillance system should do, I think.
Exactly.
Thank you, Marta. Anastasia is asking, how is there any way that we can explain the low fruit consumption in Central Asia?
Again, we saw, I wouldn't like to be so much detail on that because we don't have anyone from Central Asia today to kind of help us to actually respond that. But we saw that actually vegetable and fruits were actually on a low consumption on Central Asia. I would say maybe the opportunity to have these on a daily basis as well from some of the countries. I don't know if my colleagues would like to add something on that, but I do understand that. I was actually very surprised and well surprised that Central Asia are the countries with the highest percentage of children that were breastfed, sorry, but on exclusive breastfeeding as well. When it comes to dietary habits, we actually saw the poorest, I would say, dietary habits on these countries as well. So again, you know, like Marta say, this is something that arises from this surveillance system, and we can look further and discuss further on a more local or national or, you know, regional way. But I would say that it's the lack of opportunity, the accessibility of these some of these products and food items, and the ones that, for instance, soft drinks and others without more sugary and processed foods maybe are more available to be bought. Something that might be interesting to also learn from anyone from the audience that actually could help us on this.
Thanks, Anna. I think this is an important issue. Another one from Greece, Elpis Vlachopapadopoulou, asking, and I think this goes to all of us, thank you very much for all the data. Does the WHO inform officially the ministries of health and/or education of the participating countries, asking them to take action?
Well, I can start by answering that. Of course, what I can say is that any country that, and Julianne can help me also on that, any country that actually enters COSI has to kind of have a formal agreement, and it starts, of course, with the Ministry of Health of each country. Then each Ministry of Health, this is what I assume, because in Portugal, this is how we do it. In each Ministry of Health, of course, cooperates with the Ministry of Education, because in this case, for instance, in Portugal, we have to have the Ministry of Education in partnership with us as we do the study school-based. So we actually have, it's not mandatory, I would guess, but of course it starts with the Ministry of Health, and of course the Ministry of Health has to be involved. I don't know if Julianne wants to say anything else.
Angela wanted to say something. Please unmute. Angela, please unmute.
Unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not answering for WHO. I hope Joao or Julianne can do it. But I'd just like to support what Anna said. I mean, we've done the same. And I think this is what all countries participating to COSI should do, to report and show the data to the Ministry of Health and to the Ministry of Education. And so that together we can take action to reduce the problem of obesity and overweight. And this is what our country is doing. So the Ministry of Health is now making recommendation, reducing the salt in food, and maybe introducing a tax on sugar drinks and so on. So, and other action which are taken also at local level. So, and I think this is the reason why in Italy the prevalence of childhood obesity and overweight is decreasing.
So this is really important. Julianne, may I ask you to respond as well?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think I'd like to just echo what Angela and Anna have already said, and also just the importance of this idea that from the very beginning, the ministries, often the Ministry of Health is involved. At WHO, we really see our role as supporting the member states to implement the policies and actions that they have asked for help with. So one of our core roles is actually in taking this data and trying to help disseminate it, whether it's in the international reports that we produce with the principal investigators of the country, also country reports, infographics, because at the end of the day, indeed, so much goes into collecting the data, but if we can't communicate it clearly and put it in front of the right people, it's really difficult to make the changes that we want to see. So thank you very much.
Yes, I think communication is key, not only collecting these data. And I would like to extend that we not only share these data with the ministries of health, but also provide them with the information that they need to reach out to their stakeholders back again. I can see that Joao has re-entered the call. So may I ask you, Joao, to give your point of view on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Julianne said it all, and also Anna and Angela were very clear in explaining how useful this has been at the national level to support the design of policies that really address the challenge of childhood obesity. And we think that COSI is a centerpiece in helping ministers all together and governments devising these new strategies. We, of course, as WHO, we are in a supportive role to member states. We have the policy frameworks that countries have adopted. We propose, interpretations of these frameworks at national level in line with WHO guidelines. We have guidelines on nutrients and other things, physical activity that are relevant. And we have a role of advising. We cannot prescribe to member states what they are expected to do. They ultimately, as I said in the beginning, they will choose the mix of initiatives that they would like to put forward. Having said that, if you look at countries like Italy, Portugal, Slovenia, others, you will see that the mix of policies is really very much, it's prolonged in time. It's a strategy that is consistent over time, and it's including many of the WHO guidelines elements. And in a way, almost everything is there. And then you see that after a while, the result is obvious, and there is a progress in terms of moving in the right direction. And many countries are really doing that. So we believe that we can highlight, recommend, and we have many ways of doing that. Julianne illustrated that very well. And therefore, we are in a supportive role, evidence-based. Everything we say is based on the best available evidence. And COSI, with 1 million children, is really providing the best evidence around childhood obesity you actually have in the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Joao. Speaking of progress, there is an example from Spain given by Marta García Solano. In Spain, we are now within the Ministry of Consumers Affairs, and it announced the development of the Nutri-Score implementation, front of pack labeling, taxes on sweetened beverages, and a drastic marketing reduction to children related to our Aladino study framed in COSI. So this is, I would say, a great example of how COSI has impacted on a national level. So 2 thumbs up to Spain, and we are all encouraged by examples like this. Now, there's many other questions that have been asked by you, and we don't have the time to go into all these details now, but it is time to thank you all and conclude. I would like to draw your attention to some further information that ECOG is providing. Please have a look at the brand new e-modules. Have a look at our ebook, and we are very much looking forward to welcoming you again to our next webinar. Please join us. And I would like to thank you, Joao, and your team for giving us the privilege to hold this webinar. So thank you so much. Please stay safe and have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.